Marco Polo was born in 1254 in Venice, a city-state renowned for its maritime power and vibrant trade network. During Marco's time, Venice was a bustling hub of commerce, connecting Europe with the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and beyond. The Polo family belonged to the merchant class, and Marco was born into a lineage deeply involved in trade and exploration. His father, Niccolò Polo, and uncle, Maffeo Polo, were accomplished merchants who traveled far beyond Venetian shores in pursuit of wealth and adventure. Venetian society provided fertile ground for Marco's adventurous spirit. The city was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and goods. Ships arrived daily, laden with spices, silks, and other exotic wares from distant lands, fueling the imaginations of young Venetians. Marco would have grown up hearing tales of far-off places, stimulating his curiosity and ambition. Venice in the 13th century was a powerful and independent city-state, governed by the Doge and an intricate system of councils. It dominated trade routes across the Mediterranean and Adriatic seas, often clashing with rivals like Genoa. The wealth generated by this trade made Venice a cultural and economic powerhouse, setting the stage for its Renaissance glory. Marco Polo's upbringing in this dynamic city exposed him to a world of negotiation, diplomacy, and maritime enterprise. These influences would later prove invaluable during his travels and interactions with the Mongol Empire. During Marco Polo's lifetime, the Silk Road was the most significant network of trade routes connecting the East and West. Stretching thousands of miles from Europe to China, the Silk Road was not a single road, but a complex web of overland and maritime pathways. It facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures, profoundly shaping civilizations along its length. The Silk Road's importance grew during the reign of the Mongol Empire. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, the vast empire unified much of Asia, creating a period of relative stability known as the Pax Mongolica. This stability allowed merchants, scholars, and travelers to traverse the Silk Road with greater safety than ever before. The Mongol Empire, at its height, was the largest contiguous empire in history, stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. Its rulers, particularly Kublai Khan, understood the value of trade and cultural exchange. They established efficient administrative systems, protected trade routes, and welcomed foreign merchants. This openness made it possible for individuals like Niccolò and Maffeo Polo, and later Marco, to journey deep into Mongol-controlled territories. The Mongols were also keenly interested in learning about other cultures and technologies. This curiosity created opportunities for European travelers to serve as ambassadors, advisors, and cultural intermediaries at the Mongol court. For Marco Polo, the Mongol Empire offered not only adventure but also the chance to participate in one of history's greatest cross-cultural exchanges. By the time Marco Polo embarked on his journey in 1271, the conditions were uniquely favorable. The convergence of Venetian maritime dominance, the Silk Road's thriving trade, and the Mongol Empire's stability created a world where long-distance travel was both possible and profitable. Marco's journey would take him beyond the limits of what most Europeans of his time could imagine. His eventual accounts of the lands he visited would expand the horizons of European knowledge, influencing explorers, geographers, and historians for centuries. The Polo family hailed from Venice, a city synonymous with trade and exploration. By the 13th century, the Polos had established themselves as successful merchants, dealing in luxury goods such as silk, spices, and jewels. Marco's father, Niccolò Polo, and his uncle, Maffeo Polo, were particularly enterprising. Their ventures extended beyond the Mediterranean, where most Venetian merchants operated, to the distant lands of Asia. Unlike many merchants of their time, the Polo brothers were not content with relying on intermediaries or local traders. Instead, they sought direct access to the sources of their goods, a daring approach that reflected their ambition and willingness to take risks. In 1260, when Marco was only 6 years old, Niccolò and Maffeo Polo embarked on an ambitious journey to the east. They traveled overland through Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and into the Black Sea region, navigating territories dominated by the Mongols. Their goal was to establish trade connections and explore new markets. Their travels took them to Bokhara, a thriving city on the Silk Road in modern Uzbekistan. It was here that the Polo brothers encountered envoys of Kublai Khan, the Mongol emperor who ruled over China and much of Asia. The envoys invited them to the court of Kublai Khan in China, recognizing their potential as cultural intermediaries between East and West. The Polos' journey to Kublai Khan's court was an arduous one, but it marked a turning point in their lives. Upon arrival, they were warmly received by the great Khan, who was fascinated by their accounts of Europe. Kublai Khan, known for his intellectual curiosity, questioned them extensively about Western politics, religion, and culture. Recognizing the potential of these Venetian merchants to bridge the gap between his empire and Europe, Kublai Khan entrusted them with a mission. He asked the Polos to return to Europe and deliver a message to Pope Clement IV. The message requested that the Pope send learned men to the Mongol court to discuss Christianity and other matters of mutual interest. This mission illustrated the Mongol Empire's openness to dialogue and exchange with foreign cultures. The Polo brothers returned to Venice around 1269, after nearly a decade of travel. Upon their return, they found that Pope Clement IV had died, leaving the papal throne vacant. The delay in appointing a new pope postponed their ability to fulfill Kublai Khan's request. Meanwhile, Niccolo reunited with his young son, Marco, who had grown up in his father's absence. The Polos used this time to prepare for their eventual return to the east. Their tales of distant lands and their interaction with Kublai Khan likely captivated the young Marco, sparking his desire for adventure. By the time Pope Gregory X was elected in 1271, the Polos were ready to set out again, this time with Marco accompanying them. Marco Polo, now 17 years old, joined his father and uncle for their second journey to the east. For Marco, this was not only an opportunity to escape the confines of Venetian life, but also a chance to witness the wonders of the world beyond Europe. He quickly proved himself to be a keen observer, absorbing the details of the landscapes, cultures, and people he encountered. The family's preparations for the journey were meticulous. They gathered precious gifts for Kublai Khan, including rare oils and relics, to demonstrate their respect and goodwill. They also ensured they had the necessary provisions and knowledge to navigate the challenging route ahead. The early travels of Niccolo and Marco Polo laid the groundwork for Marco's extraordinary journey. Their pioneering spirit and willingness to venture into unknown territories set an example for Marco, shaping his outlook and ambition. Their interactions with Kublai Khan established a relationship of trust that would later allow Marco to spend years in the Mongol court, gaining insights into one of history's greatest empires. This period also marked a significant moment in the history of East-West relations. The Polos were among the first Europeans to bring detailed accounts of the Mongol Empire back to Europe, challenging misconceptions and broadening the scope of European knowledge. In 1271, Marco Polo embarked on a journey that would transform him from a Venetian merchant's son into one of the most famous explorers in history. Accompanying his father, Niccolo, and uncle, Marco joined what was essentially a diplomatic and trade mission to the court of Kublai Khan, the Mongol Emperor of China. The journey was meticulously planned to navigate the Silk Road, a route fraught with geographical challenges and political complexities. The Polos' preparations included assembling gifts for Kublai Khan, who had shown great interest in Western culture and religion. Among the items they carried were sacred oils from the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, a gift requested by Kublai Khan to symbolize the Christian faith. Additionally, the Polos ensured they had adequate provisions, local guides, and resources to navigate the diverse terrains and climates they would encounter. They departed Venice in late 1271, likely filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. For Marco, it was the beginning of an adventure that would take him farther from home than most Europeans of his era could imagine. The Polos' journey took them across a vast and varied landscape, each region presenting its own challenges and wonders. After departing Venice, they traveled through the Mediterranean to Acre, modern-day Akko, Israel, a key stop for pilgrims and merchants heading east. From there, They moved to the city of Ayaz in Cilician Armenia, modern-day Turkey, where they resupplied and sought information about the road ahead. Their route followed the overland pathways of the Silk Road, a network of caravan routes connecting Europe and Asia. The Polos passed through the Middle East, crossing modern-day Iraq and Iran. In Persia, Marco observed thriving cities like Tabriz and Yazd, which were hubs of trade and culture. He marveled at the intricate architecture and the bustling bazaars filled with goods from across Asia. As they traveled further east, the Polos encountered harsher landscapes, including the desolate Karakum Desert and the towering Pamir Mountains. These regions tested their endurance, with extreme climates and scarce resources. Despite the challenges, Marco's curiosity drove him to observe and record the customs and lifestyles of the people they encountered. Throughout their journey, the Polos encountered diverse cultures and peoples. Marco's accounts reflect his keen interest in understanding these foreign societies. In Persia, he encountered the Zoroastrians, whose fire worship rituals fascinated him. Crossing into Central Asia, he witnessed the nomadic lifestyles of the Turkic and Mongol tribes, noting their skills in horsemanship and their mobile way of life. Marco's observations extended to religion, language, and governance. He recorded the influence of Islam in the Middle East and Central Asia and remarked on the coexistence of various faiths along the Silk Road. His exposure to these cultures broadened his worldview and prepared him for the cosmopolitan environment of Kublai Khan's court. As the Polos entered Mongol-controlled territories, they began to experience the benefits of the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability and security under the Mongol Empire. Roads and trade routes were well maintained, and the Mongol rulers provided protection for travelers and merchants. Marco noted the efficiency of the Mongol postal system, which used relay stations to enable swift communication across vast distances. This network impressed him with its organization and scale, reflecting the administrative sophistication of the Mongol Empire. Upon reaching the city of Kashgar, modern-day Xinjiang, China, Marco encountered a vibrant trading hub. Here, goods from China, India, Persia, and beyond converged, creating a marketplace of unparalleled diversity. Marco was struck by the richness of the local culture, as well as the advanced infrastructure that facilitated trade. After 4 years of arduous travel, the Polos finally reached the court of Kublai Khan, likely in 1275. By this time, Marco had matured into a resourceful and observant young man, ready to make an impression on the Mongol emperor. Marco's first impressions of China were shaped by its grandeur and complexity. The cities were larger and more sophisticated than any he had seen in Europe. Roads were meticulously paved, canals crisscrossed the countryside, and the markets overflowed with goods that were exotic even by Venetian standards. When the Polos were presented to Kublai Khan, they were warmly received. The Great Khan, who ruled over the Yuan dynasty in China, was intrigued by these Europeans who had braved the journey to his court. He was particularly interested in Marco, whose youthful curiosity and ability to learn languages quickly set him apart. Though young and inexperienced, Marco soon found a role within Kublai Khan's administration. The emperor valued his knowledge of Western customs and saw him as a potential intermediary in diplomatic and cultural exchanges. Marco's journey to China had transformed him from a merchant's son into a participant in one of history's most dynamic imperial courts. Upon arriving at the court of Kublai Khan in 1275, Marco Polo was thrust into a world of unparalleled opulence and sophistication. Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, ruled over the Yuan dynasty in China, the most powerful segment of the vast Mongol Empire. His court was a dazzling center of culture, governance, and innovation, attracting talent and knowledge from across the empire. Marco's first encounter with Kublai Khan was a momentous occasion. The Polos presented their gifts and delivered the Pope's messages, fulfilling the mission entrusted to them years earlier. Kublai Khan, intrigued by these foreigners who had traveled such great distances, welcomed them warmly. His attention quickly shifted to Marco, whose intelligence, youth, and ability to communicate effectively impressed the emperor. Marco's keen observational skills and adaptability made him a valuable asset to Kublai Khan. Marco Polo's role in Kublai Khan's court was multifaceted. Initially, he served as a trusted envoy, traveling to distant parts of the empire on behalf of the Great Khan. These missions allowed Marco to witness the vastness and diversity of the Mongol Empire, from the bustling cities of China to the remote provinces on its borders. One of Marco's most significant contributions was his ability to communicate and build rapport with various peoples across the empire. Fluent in several languages, Marco was able to navigate the cultural and linguistic complexities of the regions he visited. His detailed reports of these missions provided valuable insights to Kublai Khan, further solidifying his position in the court. Kublai Khan also sought Marco's perspective on Western customs, governance, and religion. The emperor's curiosity extended to Christianity, which he viewed as one of many belief systems within his pluralistic empire. Marco's explanations of European traditions and practices deepened the cultural exchange between East and West. Marco Polo's descriptions of Kublai Khan's court paint a vivid picture of its grandeur. The palace, located in the capital city of Kinbalik, modern-day Beijing, was a marvel of architecture and design. Marco marveled at the intricate carvings, lavish decorations, and vast halls that could accommodate thousands of people. The emperor's court was a microcosm of the Mongol Empire's wealth and diversity, with representatives from across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Banquets at the court were extravagant affairs, featuring delicacies from across the empire. Marco described the use of porcelain tableware, rare spices, and intricate culinary techniques that were unlike anything seen in Europe. The emperor's treasury was filled with gold, jewels, and precious artifacts, underscoring the immense wealth of the Yuan dynasty. Kublai Khan's court also served as a center of innovation. Scholars, engineers, and artisans from various cultures contributed to advancements in technology, governance, and the arts. Marco's exposure to this environment expanded his understanding of the world and inspired his later accounts. Kublai Khan's trust in Marco Polo grew over time. The emperor recognized Marco's loyalty and capability, assigning him increasingly important tasks. One notable mission took Marco to the province of Yunnan, a remote and rugged region in southwestern China. There, he observed the local customs and resources, reporting back to Kublai Khan with valuable information. Marco also served as a tax inspector in one of the empire's provinces. This role gave him insight into the administrative systems of the Mongol Empire, which were highly efficient and organized. Marco admired the use of paper currency, a concept unknown in Europe at the time, and documented its widespread use in the Yuan dynasty. Kublai Khan's willingness to entrust Marco with these responsibilities reflected his open-minded approach to governance. The emperor valued talent and merit over ethnicity or background, allowing individuals like Marco to rise within his administration. While serving in the court, Marco immersed himself in the cultures of China and the Mongol Empire. He observed and documented aspects of daily life, from religious practices to artistic traditions. Marco's accounts provide some of the earliest detailed descriptions of Chinese technologies, such as gunpowder, silk production, and the use of coal as fuel. Marco was particularly fascinated by the organization and scale of Chinese cities. He described Hangzhou, a major urban center, as the finest and most splendid city in the world. Its infrastructure, including canals, bridges, and marketplaces, left a lasting impression on him. Marco's observations highlight the advanced state of urban planning and commerce in Yuan China. Despite his privileged position in Kublai Khan's court, Marco Polo faced challenges. The sheer distance from his homeland and the cultural differences he encountered tested his resilience. He adapted to these challenges by embracing the diversity of the Mongol Empire, learning from its people and environments. Over the years, Marco developed a deep respect for Kublai Khan and his vision of a unified, multicultural empire. At the same time, he maintained a sense of wonder and curiosity about the world, which would later drive him to share his experiences with a European audience. Marco Polo's explorations throughout China revealed a land of remarkable wealth, sophistication, and technological innovation. The vastness of the Yuan Empire allowed Marco to witness an unparalleled diversity of landscapes, from fertile farmlands and bustling cities to arid deserts and remote mountain ranges. He marveled at China's advanced agricultural techniques, which included extensive irrigation systems and the cultivation of rice, silk, and tea. China's wealth was evident not only in its natural resources, but also in its industry. Marco observed large-scale production of silk and porcelain, industries that operated with a level of organization and efficiency that surpassed anything in Europe at the time. The use of coal as a fuel source also struck Marco as a unique and ingenious practice, as coal was virtually unknown in Europe. Marco Polo was particularly captivated by the cities of China, which he described as larger, more populous, and more organized than any he had seen. Hangzhou, which Marco called Kansai, was a shining example of urban splendor. According to Marco, Hangzhou boasted a population in the millions and was filled with markets, gardens, and waterways. He was especially impressed by the city's infrastructure, which included well-paved roads and a network of canals that facilitated trade and transportation. Quanzhou, a port city on the southeastern coast, was another focal point of Marco's travels. As one of the busiest ports in the world, Quanzhou was a melting pot of cultures, with merchants from Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia trading alongside the Chinese. Marco's accounts of Quanzhou highlight the global interconnectedness of trade during the Yuan dynasty. One of the most impressive engineering feats Marco encountered was the Grand Canal, an extensive waterway that connected northern and southern China. Stretching over 1,700 kilometers, the canal was a vital artery for trade and transportation, allowing goods to flow efficiently across the empire. Marco noted the canal's role in unifying the country economically and politically, as it facilitated the movement of grain, troops, and other resources. The canal was emblematic of the Yuan dynasty's emphasis on infrastructure. Marco observed how this vast network of roads, rivers, and canals enabled the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures on an unprecedented scale. These trade networks were not limited to China. They connected with the Silk Road, creating a vast system of commerce that extended to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Marco Polo's travels provided him with first-hand exposure to the technological advancements of China. Among the most striking were the use of paper money and the printing press. Marco described how paper currency, issued by the emperor, facilitated trade and reduced the need for merchants to carry heavy coins. He marveled at the trust placed in this system, which he considered both innovative and efficient. The printing press was another innovation that caught Marco's attention. While Europe was still relying on labor-intensive methods for producing written materials, China had developed a system of block printing that allowed for the mass production of books and documents. This technology contributed to high literacy rates and the dissemination of knowledge throughout the empire. Marco was also fascinated by Chinese naval technology. He observed the construction of large ships, some with multiple decks and watertight compartments, which made them capable of long ocean voyages. These ships were instrumental in maintaining China's dominance in maritime trade. China's religious and cultural diversity made a profound impression on Marco Polo. He encountered Buddhists, Taoists, Muslims, and Christians living and worshipping side by side. This pluralistic society, supported by the Mongol rulers' policies of religious tolerance, contrasted sharply with the religious tensions that often defined medieval Europe. Marco took particular interest in Buddhist monasteries and the rituals of the monks. He described their temples, adorned with intricate carvings and statues, as places of great beauty and serenity. He also noted the practice of ancestor worship, which he found deeply rooted in Chinese culture. In addition to religion, Marco observed various cultural practices, from traditional festivals and culinary traditions to the role of family in Chinese society. He marveled at the elegance of Chinese clothing, especially the fine silk garments worn by the elite. Marco Polo's travels extended beyond the major cities and trade routes, taking him to the remote and less visited regions of the empire. In the southern provinces, he explored the jungles and rugged landscapes inhabited by diverse ethnic groups. He documented their unique customs, languages, and ways of life, emphasizing the vast cultural diversity within the Yuan Empire. In the north, Marco visited the steppe regions, where he observed the nomadic lifestyles of the Mongols. He described their yurts, horsemanship and reliance on livestock, noting how these practices contrasted with the sedentary lifestyles of the Chinese in the south. His travels also took him to the mountainous regions of Yunnan and Tibet, where he encountered challenging terrains and extreme climates. Marco's accounts of these areas provide valuable insights into the geography and culture of regions that were largely unknown to Europeans at the time. As a trusted member of Kublai Khan's court, Marco Polo was frequently tasked with diplomatic missions that took him beyond the borders of China. These missions served dual purposes: strengthening the Mongol Empire's political alliances and gathering intelligence on distant regions. Marco's adaptability, linguistic skills, and curiosity made him an ideal envoy for these assignments. Marco's travels allowed him to interact with a wide range of cultures, rulers, and societies. His role as an envoy required not only negotiation skills, but also a deep understanding of local customs and traditions. This experience broadened his perspective and enriched his later accounts. One of Marco Polo's most notable diplomatic missions took him to Southeast Asia, including modern-day Myanmar, Burma, Vietnam, and Sumatra. These regions, known for their strategic importance and abundant resources, were significant to Kublai Khan's expansionist policies. In Myanmar, Marco encountered the Kingdom of Pagan, a Buddhist state known for its magnificent temples. He described the region's architecture, wealth, and religious practices with admiration. However, he also noted the challenges posed by the region's dense jungles and rugged terrain, which made governance and conquest difficult. In Vietnam, then part of the Kampa Kingdom, Marco observed a society that blended Indian, Chinese, and local influences. He remarked on the kingdom's maritime prowess and its vibrant trade networks, which connected it to both China and the Indian Ocean. Sumatra, an island rich in natural resources, captivated Marco with its exotic wildlife and diverse cultures. He documented the region's reliance on spice trade, particularly pepper, which was highly valued in the global markets of the time. Marco's descriptions of the indigenous peoples of Sumatra reveal his fascination with their unique customs, languages, and lifestyles. Marco Polo's travels also took him to India, a land of immense cultural and religious diversity. He visited coastal cities such as Mylapore, modern-day Chennai, and Hormuz, observing their bustling ports and thriving trade networks. India's prominence in the spice trade, as well as its production of textiles, gemstones, and other luxury goods, made it a key destination for merchants and diplomats alike. Marco documented the religious practices of India with great interest. He observed Hindu temples, noting their intricate carvings and rituals. He also encountered Muslim communities, which had established a strong presence in Indian trade and politics by the 13th century. These observations provided Marco with a nuanced understanding of India's multifaceted society. Marco Polo's missions occasionally required him to undertake perilous sea voyages, particularly across the Indian Ocean. These journeys exposed him to the challenges of maritime travel, including unpredictable weather, pirate attacks, and the complexities of navigation. Despite these risks, Marco marveled at the skill of the sailors who navigated these waters. He described the construction of ships, including the use of sewn planks and lateen sails, which allowed for long-distance voyages. His accounts also highlight the role of monsoon winds in facilitating trade between the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Southeast Asia. The Indian Ocean was a vital hub of global commerce, and Marco's experiences here underscored the interconnectedness of the medieval world. The exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures that occurred in these waters played a crucial role in shaping the societies he encountered. On one of his return missions to the West, Marco traveled through the Middle East, where he visited cities such as Baghdad, Mosul, and Basra. These cities, which had once been centers of the Islamic Golden Age, were still significant hubs of trade and learning despite the Mongol conquests. Marco's observations of the Middle East included its architectural wonders, bustling markets, and intellectual achievements. He noted the region's contributions to astronomy, medicine, and mathematics, which were renowned throughout the medieval world. His accounts also reveal a deep appreciation for the region's cultural richness and its role in facilitating global trade. Marco Polo's diplomatic missions were not only a testament to his personal abilities, but also a reflection of the Mongol Empire's vast reach and ambition. Through these journeys, Marco gathered a wealth of knowledge about the lands he visited, documenting their geography, economies, and cultures with remarkable detail. These travels also highlighted the interconnectedness of the 13th century world. Marco's accounts illustrate how trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange transcended geographical boundaries, creating a network of interaction that spanned continents. Marco Polo's experiences as a diplomat enriched his understanding of the world and contributed to the depth of his later writings. They provided him with first-hand insights into regions that were largely unknown to Europeans, making his accounts an invaluable resource for understanding the medieval global landscape. After nearly 2 decades of service to Kublai Khan, Marco Polo and his family began to yearn for their homeland. The Mongol emperor, now elderly, reluctantly granted the Polos permission to leave. Their departure was facilitated by a diplomatic mission, escorting a Mongol princess, Kakachin, to Persia for her marriage to a Persian prince, Arghun Khan. This mission allowed the Polos to leave the Mongol Empire under the pretense of service to the Khan. The journey home was fraught with challenges. Traveling by sea, the Polos faced treacherous conditions, including storms and outbreaks of disease. Of the 600 people who began the voyage, only a fraction survived, including the Polos and the princess. Despite these hardships, the journey provided Marco with yet more opportunities to observe the diverse cultures and landscapes of the regions they traversed. After arriving in Persia, the Polos continued their overland journey back to Venice. Along the way, Marco reflected on the years he had spent in the service of the Mongol Empire and the wealth of knowledge he had acquired. The journey finally ended in 1295, nearly 24 years after their departure from Venice. Upon their return, Marco and his family found Venice transformed. The city was now a bustling hub of commerce and culture, its maritime power rivaling that of other Italian city-states. Despite their wealth and exotic stories, the Polos initially struggled to reintegrate into Venetian society. Many of their contemporaries found their tales of distant lands and unimaginable wealth difficult to believe. The Polos' time abroad had not only changed their perspective, but also their appearance. Dressed in foreign attire and speaking of faraway places, they were viewed with curiosity and skepticism. However, they soon reclaimed their place in Venetian society, aided by the wealth and treasures they had brought back from the East. In 1298, a pivotal event in Marco Polo's life occurred when Venice went to war with Genoa, a rival city-state. Marco served as a captain of a Venetian galley, but was captured during a naval battle and imprisoned in Genoa. It was during his time in prison that Marco met Rusticolo de Pisa, a fellow prisoner and a writer of Arthurian romances. Recognizing the value of Marco's experiences, Rusticolo encouraged him to share his stories. Marco dictated his accounts of his travels, recounting his adventures in vivid detail. Rusticolo, skilled in the art of storytelling, shaped these accounts into a coherent narrative that blended factual observation with elements of wonder and exaggeration. The result of this collaboration was Il Milione, commonly known as the Travels of Marco Polo. The book was groundbreaking in its scope, offering Europeans their first detailed glimpse of East. Marco's descriptions of Kublai Khan's court, the wealth of Chinese cities, and the vast trade networks of Asia fascinated his contemporaries. The travels combined factual accounts with elements of myth and speculation. For example, Marco described fantastical creatures like unicorns, likely rhinoceroses, and enormous birds capable of carrying elephants, the mythical roc. These embellishments, while adding to the book's allure, also fueled skepticism among readers. The book also introduced Europeans to new concepts and technologies, such as paper money, coal, and the postal system used in the Yuan dynasty. Marco's accounts helped expand the geographical understanding of the medieval world, providing details about regions as far afield as Japan, India, and the Middle East. The reception of the Travels of Marco Polo was mixed. While some readers marveled at its descriptions of distant lands, others dismissed it as a collection of tall tales. The book's blend of fact and fiction made it both a valuable source of information and a subject of controversy. Despite this skepticism, the Travels gained widespread popularity. It was translated into multiple languages and circulated widely across Europe, influencing explorers, geographers, and merchants. Figures like Christopher Columbus later carried copies of the book, inspired by its descriptions of Asia's wealth and resources. The book's impact extended beyond geography. It shaped European perceptions of the East, fostering both admiration and curiosity. It also highlighted the interconnectedness of the medieval world, demonstrating the economic and cultural exchanges that linked Europe, Asia, and Africa. After his release from Genoese captivity in 1299, Marco Polo returned to Venice. He spent the remainder of his life managing his family's trading business and sharing stories of his travels. Despite his fame, Marco faced ongoing skepticism from those who doubted the veracity of his accounts. Marco died in 1324, leaving behind a legacy that would endure for centuries. On his deathbed, he reportedly stated, "I have not told half of what I saw," suggesting that his experiences were even more extraordinary than what he had shared. This statement has fueled debates about the accuracy and completeness of his accounts. The Travels of Marco Polo remains a cornerstone of exploration literature, offering insights into the medieval world and the exchange of ideas between East and West. Its blend of adventure, observation, and imagination continues to captivate readers, making Marco Polo one of history's most enduring figures. Marco Polo's accounts of his travels significantly expanded the geographical knowledge of his time. Before the Travels of Marco Polo, European understanding of Asia was limited and often shaped by myths and second-hand accounts. Marco's detailed observations provided a clearer picture of the vast lands to the east, including their cultures, economies, and political systems. Marco described regions that were previously unknown or poorly understood, such as the prosperous cities of China, the vast steppes of Central Asia, and the trade routes of the Indian Ocean. His accounts introduced Europeans to the complexity and richness of the Mongol Empire, highlighting its advanced infrastructure, governance, and trade networks. While Marco's descriptions were not always entirely accurate, they offered a valuable starting point for cartographers and explorers. His observations were incorporated into medieval maps, such as the Catalan Atlas, and inspired generations of explorers who sought to verify and expand upon his findings. Perhaps the most significant impact of Marco Polo's travels was their influence on later explorers. Christopher Columbus, one of the most famous figures in the age of exploration, was deeply inspired by the Travels of Marco Polo. Columbus carried a copy of the book during his voyages, using it as a guide to envision Asia's wealth and resources. Other explorers, such as Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan, were similarly influenced by Marco's accounts. His descriptions of trade routes, ports, and navigational practices provided a foundation for the maritime explorations that would define the Renaissance era. Marco's tales of a land filled with riches and innovations spurred European interest in establishing direct trade routes to Asia. This desire for exploration and economic expansion ultimately led to the discovery of the New World and the establishment of global trade networks. Marco Polo's travels highlighted the cultural exchange facilitated by the Silk Road, a network of trade routes connecting East and West. Through his descriptions, Europeans became aware of goods such as silk, spices, porcelain, and precious stones that were transported along these routes. Beyond material goods, the Silk Road was a conduit for ideas, technologies, and religions. Marco documented how Buddhist, Muslim, and Christian communities interacted and coexisted within the Mongol Empire, offering a vision of cultural pluralism that was rare in medieval Europe. Marco's writings also drew attention to technologies like paper money, the printing press, and advanced shipbuilding techniques. These innovations, introduced to Europe over time, played a crucial role in shaping the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Despite his fame, Marco Polo's accounts were not universally accepted as factual. Many of his contemporaries dismissed his stories as exaggerated or fabricated, a skepticism that persists among some scholars today. Critics point to the absence of certain details, such as the Great Wall of China or Chinese tea culture, as evidence that Marco's travels may have been embellished or based on second-hand information. Others argue that Marco's omissions reflect the priorities and perspectives of his time. For instance, the Great Wall may not have been as prominent during the Yuan dynasty, and tea, while significant in Chinese culture, may not have seemed noteworthy to a Venetian merchant. Regardless of these criticisms, the Travels of Marco Polo remains a valuable historical document. Its blend of observation and imagination provides insights into the medieval mindset, as well as the challenges of cross-cultural understanding. Marco Polo's travels also left a lasting imprint on literature and art. His tales of exotic lands and fantastical creatures inspire writers such as Dante Alighieri, who referenced Marco's accounts in the Divine Comedy. Marco's adventures also influenced the development of travel literature as a genre, setting a precedent for later works like Ibn Battuta's Rihla and Sir John Mandeville's Travels. Artists and illustrators, fascinated by Marco's descriptions, created maps, paintings, and manuscripts that visualized his accounts. These works not only celebrated Marco's journeys, but also helped disseminate his stories to a broader audience. In modern times, Marco Polo's life has inspired countless novels, films, and television series, underscoring his enduring appeal as a symbol of adventure and exploration. Marco Polo's greatest legacy lies in the spirit of curiosity and exploration that he embodied. His willingness to venture into the unknown, to learn from other cultures, and to share his experiences with the world continues to resonate. His accounts bridge the gap between East and West, fostering a greater understanding of the interconnectedness of human societies. They remind us of the value of curiosity, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of knowledge. In the centuries since his death, Marco Polo has become a symbol of the explorer's spirit. His name is synonymous with adventure, and his life serves as a testament to the transformative power of travel.